Hello everyone, my name is Tanya Cordwell. I am a second-year student in the Clinical Rehabilitation and Mental Health Counseling program at West Virginia University. I have recently completed my practicum with the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation in Pennsylvania. The Office of Vocational Rehabilitation aims to assist Pennsylvanians with disabilities to secure and maintain employment and independence. One of the ways in which this is done is by partnering with the ARC of Pennsylvania. The ARC of Pennsylvania promotes the human rights of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and actively supports their full inclusion and participation in the community throughout their lifetimes. The ARC of Pennsylvania has approximately 140,000 members and approximately 700 local and state chapters. In the early 20th century, in the state of Pennsylvania, mental hospitals and institutions continued to grow overcrowded, and abuse was starting to be reported more often. The almosts, as they were called, were morally bad and genetically flawed. The rise of eugenics movement, better breeding, castration, sterilization, and medical experiments were often done in environments such as this. The slogan at the time was "Institutionalize your children or keep them out of sight." This was especially true for parents that had a child with an intellectual disability. In 1949, things began to change. Parents became frustrated and angry and began to unite. A strong national movement was established at this time with the combined efforts. The first campaign slogan they had was "The retarded can be helped." This then began the National Association of Parents and Friends of Retarded Children. In 1949, Florence Schwartz wrote a letter to the Philadelphia newspaper asking parents of children with mental retardation to attend a meeting to discuss their frustrations and answers to the community's fears about persons with mental retardation. The Pennsylvania Association for Retarded and Handicapped Children, or the PARC, was formed by parents frustrated by the lack of services for their children. In 1950, PARC began to provide opportunity classes for children with developmental disabilities. At this time, all children in Pennsylvania with IQ scores under 50 were excluded from public school systems. In 1954, a new state law allows public schools to provide classes for children with IQ scores below 50. And in 1957, an influenza epidemic strikes Pennhurst Center in Pennsylvania, killing many residents. The PARC investigation reveals there is no immunization program in state institutions. Under pressure from the PARC, the Pennsylvania Departments of Health and Welfare agreed to create an immunization program. In 1960, Pennsylvania provides first sheltered workshops for persons with disabilities as a part of efforts to increase independent living. In 1966, the MHMR Act was passed by the Pennsylvania General Assembly, and it provided the first substantial funding for community mental retardation programs. In 1968, parents, including Eleanor Elkin, became increasingly frustrated by the deplorable conditions at the Pennhurst State School and Hospital. They encouraged Bill Baldini, NBC Philadelphia, to film and report life inside the institution, which becomes part of a 5-part series called Suffer the Little Children, which presents the inhumane living conditions of the children at Pennhurst State School and Hospital. Investigations, news reports, and even visits by legislators result in no change. In 1968, the PARC and JC's representatives visited all state mental retardation institutions. They could not believe what they saw, and some of them became visibly and physically sick, said one PARC leader. In 1969, the PARC membership votes on a resolution to improve or arrest the continued deterioration of Pennhurst, after Residential Services Committee's chair, Dennis Haggerty, shows photos of a young Pennhurst man burned to death. In 1969, the Pennsylvania General Assembly passes a liens bill. This removed all burden of property liens against parents of children in the institutions who could not cover the costs of their care. The PARC files litigation against the state for the right to education for children with developmental disabilities. Thomas Gilhole from the Public Interest Law Center of Philadelphia is hired to analyze the problem of Pennhurst and recommend an appropriate course of action. In November of 1969, Gilhole proposes 5 possible approaches, one being the right to education, citing Brown versus the Board of Education. He stated, education in the community is a necessary condition of dismantling the institutions. Gilhole builds a class action lawsuit. The 13 individual plaintiffs and the PARC would represent the class of all retarded persons. The complaint was filed January 7, 1971. Attorney Gilhole claims due process and equal protection under the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution were violated because a constitutional challenge to the state statutes were serious and substantial. A 3-judge court was required. A landmark decision was made on October 7, 1971. The court affirmed access to a free public program of education and training appropriate to his learning capabilities to all mentally retarded children between the ages of 6 and 21. Placement in regular school is preferable to placement in special schools classes, is also preferable to placement in any other type of program of education and training. After this landmark decision, many state institutions in the state of Pennsylvania began to change. In 1972, the PARC Consent Decree, a legal agreement between the PARC and the Commonwealth of Education, is signed, and it guaranteed a free public school education for all school-age children. This agreement laid the foundation for federal law providing individual education programs for all children with disabilities. In 1973, the PARC leads efforts to end years of human experimentation in state institutions. In 1975, the PARC joined suit to close Pennhurst State School and Hospital, citing adverse and dangerous conditions. In 1976, the PARC assists in drafting and advocating for the federal right to education law. And in 1977, the Pennhurst Center ordered closed by the U.S. District Court Judge Raymond Broderick, finding its conditions violated the civil rights of the residents. The state was ordered to place all Pennhurst residents in community programs. As a result of the findings of the deplorable conditions in the Pennhurst State Hospital and Institution, many federal actions began to follow the PARC. In 1972, Mills versus the Board of Education of District Columbia, where the federal district in Columbia expands the PARC versus Pennsylvania Commonwealth by ruling to cover all school-age children with disabilities. In 1974, the Education of the Handicapped Act, the EHA, and this expanded Title VI. The EHA provides federal funding to states to ensure that children with disabilities are provided with a free, appropriate public education. And in 1975, the Education for All Handicapped Children Act. Congress finds that over half of the disabled children are not receiving appropriate educational services. In fact, 8 million are not receiving any appropriate education at all. 1 million children with disabilities are not receiving any education at all, and for this reason, the EHA is amended to become the EAHCA. The Individual Education Plan, or the IEP, is born. This act also requires that students with disabilities be placed in the least restrictive, or LRE, environment possible. In the years following Pennhurst, In 1980, reflecting a change in the national organization, the PARC began to change its name to the Association for the Retarded Citizens of Pennsylvania, or ARC. In 1983, the ARC-PA testifies before U.S. Senator John Hines on the need to expand community service programs, advocates ask for the change in Medicaid, allowing community use of funds previously limited to institutionalized use. In 1987, Pennhurst Center officially closed after an 11-year legal battle. In 1988, the ARC's memberships approved a position paper on integration, setting forth its ideals that every person with a disability and those without disabilities should be fully integrated in all aspects of life, including physical, social, academic, and community. Services offered through the ARC have always been implemented throughout the history of the program. However, with changing times, these services have now been updated and are used now. These programs include Me, the ARC Discovery Employment Transitions, and of course, advocacy. The mission of the Include Me program is to build and strengthen the inclusive education capacity for all public school students and discover meaningful employment opportunities, meeting Pennsylvania employee and employer needs. Include Me strives to ensure all impacted students have an equal access to all aspects of life and the community throughout their lifespan. This is a new model for the inclusive education and gaining meaningful employment for Pennsylvania students with intellectual and developmental disabilities. This program has also been looked at the federal level, with other states now implying the same kind of program. All individuals with significant impact of developmental and intellectual disability deserve equal educational and competitive employment rights. The ARC Discovery Employment Transitions, or ADEPT, offers discovery and customized employment to Pennsylvania. It's nationally certified in discovery, customized employment, and systematic instruction. The discovery seeks to answer the question, who is this person? In answering that question, the consultants work with the individual with developmental and intellectual disabilities to develop a comprehensive profile. This profile is a non-traditional, no-fail form which provides the information on the person's strengths and conditions for success to help find the right job. While discovery is not employment, it is the first step in developing truly customized employment and is ideal for all people, not just individuals with an intellectual disability. Advocacy in the ARC of Pennsylvania is done in a number of different ways. The organization is always looking for donations to help them assist their cause. One way they raise money is through Amazon Smile, and I've included a link that you can follow to find out more about it. But basically, Amazon, the same Amazon we all use, will donate 0.5% of the price of your eligible purchases to the Amazon Smile charitable organization of your choice. There's many charitable organizations on there, so I highly recommend that you kind of go check this site out. And they also advocate for employment, and that campaign is called the I Want to Work campaign, and we'll look at that here in a moment. The I Want to Work campaign has partnered with the ARC of Pennsylvania, and it's a self-advocacy campaign aimed at promoting employment for youth with disabilities. They aim to make sure that students have internship and part-time job experiences so that they are better prepared for postgraduate employment. And again, I've also included a link that you can follow up on this, and it's also a really good advocacy, and it's also a really good program. In learning more about the ARC of Pennsylvania and also completing my practicum experience at the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, I really thought that this fit in with Super's developmental self-concept theory. And I thought about this and why it fit in because this theory states that vocational development is the process of developing and implementing a self-concept. As a self-concept becomes more realistic and stable, so does the vocational choice and behavior. People choose occupations that permit them to express their self-concepts. Work satisfaction is related to the degree that they've been able to implement their self-concepts. And I really think this fits with OVR's statement about getting individuals with a disability back into the workforce, as well as the ARC of Pennsylvania, not only getting them back into employment, but also assisting them throughout their lifetime and getting them back into the community. I would like to thank everybody for listening to my presentation. And if you have any other questions or you want to find out anything more about the ARC of Pennsylvania, I've included their contact information, their address and their phone number, as well as if you want to find a local chapter, there is the website. And they also have a Facebook page that has a lot of great information and events that are coming up. Again, thank you for your time.